Thank you for listening to the Speaking Out on Sex Abuse podcast with host Clara and Jimmy Hinton. If you're new to the podcast, please subscribe and share so you never miss an episode. Search for us on your favorite podcast app, or you can find the podcast on jimmyhinton.org and findingahealingplace.com. Please rate our show, subscribe, and share so we can spread the word. If you would like to support us and get exclusive rewards, go to patreon.com/speakingout. Find a tier that best fits you and join as a patron of the podcast. Now let's get into the show. Welcome to this week's podcast with host Jimmy Hinton.
And Jimmy's mom, Clara.
I remembered my name this week.
You did super, Jimmy.
Doing so much better. Thank you.
I am so proud of you.
Thank you to our patrons who make this podcast possible.
Yes, we love you. We appreciate you. We appreciate your help. And I know that all of our listeners appreciate that. It's because of you that we're able to do this.
Absolutely.
Yes.
So, we're going to talk about what we do when the justice system fails. And if you are not aware, there was a recent article that came forward about the FBI's handling of the Larry Nassar case. They completely botched it. FBI agents were taking people from USA Gymnastics out and, out for lunch, and they were, yakking it up and chatting, laughing about the whole case. Meanwhile, there were hundreds of victims that were being produced by Larry Nassar. So there's this article that came out in Rolling Stone, I think, trying to look for the date. It was just yesterday or the day before. Anyway, the title of the article, they don't give the SH word. Former agent says FBI ignores child sex abuse cases. So Jane Turner, a 25-year FBI veteran, blew the whistle on malfeasance within her agency. She says the botched Larry Nassar abuse case is part of a pattern. I can attest that that's very true, not just within the FBI, but within a lot of organizations. Some of that is because they're just so overburdened, but some of that is because
they don't care.
People just don't care.
Yeah, I was going to say, just we'll tell it like it is. Some people do not care.
Yeah. So this is a major issue, and especially within organizations like churches, schools, et cetera, they act as if the legal justice system is the only
avenue,
recourse of action.
Absolutely.
That, if something is unfounded, that means they didn't abuse.
Right.
And we're going to welcome them back in the church with open arms, and we're going to put pastors back in ministry.
That's it. Let the court decide. We'll go along with what the court system says.
There is a major problem with that. That's a major misconception that unfounded means innocent. That doesn't mean innocent. In fact, there's this article here from right up the road from us in Pittsburgh. This article was published in May 15th, 2019. And it says, Pittsburgh police dismiss nearly 1/3 of rape cases as unfounded. So it kind of unpacks it, and it says, excuse me, on paper, the Pittsburgh Bureau of Police appears to be effective at investigating rape cases. In 2017, the Bureau reported it closed 58% of its rape cases, according to the city's response to a WESA right-to-know request. The 2017 national average was 36.5%, according to national crime reporting statistics kept by no other than the FBI. But the city's success rate comes, at least in part, from the fact that local police deemed 31% of the cases it investigated in 2017 as unfounded. The FBI uses the term unfounded to describe cases that, through an investigation, are found to be false or baseless. By comparison, the arrest rate for Pittsburgh police was 23%. According to data made available through an investigation by ProPublica, In 2016, the average arrest rate for police departments serving populations of 300,000 or more was 21%. So their arrest rate was about on par with the rest of the U.S. For cities their size, but their quote-unquote success rate skyrocketed to 58%, which still is lousy, in my opinion.
It's terrible. It's terrible. And when you think of what they're basing the unfounded on, did you have any alcohol the night of the rape? What were you wearing when the rape occurred? Did you know this person? When you got in the car with this person,
right?
How were you dressed? What did you say?
Yeah.
What were you listening to? What were you talking about? And on and on and on. And the finger is pointed at the woman as if to say, you provoked, you initiated.
Or there's nothing we can do about it.
Or there's nothing we can do about it because, and on. I know people, Jimmy, several women who have experienced rape, and this is what they went through, and it's horrible. It really is horrific. It adds to the trauma of the rape. It's awful.
Yeah,
it is terrible.
It really does.
It is terrible.
Yeah, it's a major issue,
is.
and
it
this is. I mean, we're talking about adult rapes here too.
Right. Oh yeah.
It unfortunately, I think gets even worse for kids. And
I think it's way worse.
Pennsylvania is a case in point. I mean, we are an absolutely disgusting state for how we handle child sex abuse.
Agreed. 1,000%. Agreed.
But yet we brag about it, and we're like, oh, look, Jerry Sandusky. We have all these new laws, and we're doing so great. We're not doing great at all. We have a terrible track record. The Supreme Court Justice just yesterday, the Pennsylvania Supreme Court just ruled against survivors in a really radical way again.
I'm ashamed and embarrassed of Pennsylvania. I
really
it's
am. Awful.
I'm ashamed and embarrassed. It is terrible.
Yeah.
And there has been so much rallying, education, so much going on to convince, so to speak, our legislators to open their eyes and to actually get on board with helping. And it's like they shut the door, shut the window.
Yeah. And the lobbyists are out there. I mean, throwing millions and millions and millions of dollars at these politicians. And money talks. There's no question about it that, you and I have seen a fraction of what I think Shawn Doherty's probably seen the worst of the worst. He's been up front and center. And by the way, Shawn just got elected as the president for SNAP.
I'm so excited about that.
Huge.
I'm so excited. Shawn is amazing. He fights so hard.
Yeah.
So hard for, rights and for things to be better for our legislators to listen and open their eyes and hear and get behind this. But man, he's been shot down so much. He is a fighter. He's out there to the bitter end.
Yeah.
I'm proud to know this man.
But I asked Shawn in a private conversation not real long ago, and he'd be okay with me talking about this. But I said, Do you think that people who make these mistakes, like there was the whole ballot mistake,
right,
where this 2-year window was supposed to wind up on our ballot, and it didn't because of a technical error.
I know, yeah.
And I asked Shawn, I was like, do you think that genuinely was a mistake, or do you think that there's that much corruption that it goes all the way to the top? He didn't even hesitate. He goes all the way to the top. He said, you can't come to any other conclusion.
I thought that immediately, too.
He said, statistically, the math doesn't add up. Oh. He's like, you cannot have this many back-to-back mistakes.
Errors,
Errors.
Exactly, right.
Missteps.
No.
It's an impossibility. So he said, when you follow the money, he said things begin to get really interesting. And he said it almost sounds like this conspiracy theory. And you end up sounding like somebody who's wearing a tinfoil hat. But he's like, I'm here to tell you, this system is so corrupt. These politicians are so corrupt. And this goes all the way to the top.
Pennsylvania has historically been known to be a very corrupt state. It historically, I mean, really, really corrupt. And it still holds true.
Yeah.
Unfortunately.
But it's the same in, anywhere from local police departments to your court systems, district attorneys, prosecutors, attorneys, defense attorneys, on and on and on and on the list goes. So, I hate to sound conspiratorial here, but it's a statistical fact. The system is stacked against survivors, period.
That being said, Jimmy and I were just talking prior to the podcast. We, with our case, got lucky.
Yeah.
We really did. Yes. We had a police officer definitely out there pushing in our court. We had a judge who listened and who really knew what he was doing and was honest, so we had it, we were blessed. Our family was blessed in that respect. We aren't, we didn't have to battle this, what we're talking about, but man, it's real. It's so real for thousands and thousands and thousands.
Well, and I'll never forget what Detective Beckner told me when I went in and I talked to her and I kept following up. We phone calls back and forth. She said, "I promise you that I'm going to hand deliver myself." She said, "I will physically take all of the charges, the whole investigative report. I will personally put that into the hands of the district attorney." She said, "From there," she said, "I'm just being real with you." She said, "It's anybody's guess what they're going to do with it." She's like,
and I got to tell you, I sat in that courtroom holding my breath.
I know, I did too.
We did not know. And there are so many legal loopholes that Officer Beckner told us about. She's explained to me child rape cases that went totally sour, where the person who raped the child multiple times and they had every bit of evidence got off the hook.
Yeah. And she said she's personally had cases where
she did.
She's like, they've disappeared. The investigative report just vanishes.
Yes.
And she's like, the level of corruption, she's like, it's there. She's like, and she's like, I'm just an underling. She's like, I don't get paid enough to know how this system works, but I can tell you it's very broken.
Right.
So, that
from our experience, we know we were fortunate. We were among the small percentage who are fortunate. Yeah.
So this is an article on theconversation.com. Great article, and this is, you can find replicas of this all over the place. These studies are out there. But it says less than 1/5 of reported rapes and sexual assaults lead to arrests. Less than 1/5. But there's a darker part of that story too. I'm going to read a couple paragraphs here. As experts in criminology and the justice system, we were surprised to learn that a jury voted to convict Harvey Weinstein on 2 counts of rape and sexual assault. This surprise was based on our more than a decade of research on the attrition of sexual assault cases from the criminal justice system. We know that most victims of sexual assault never report their attack to the police. For those that do report, the probability of arrest and prosecution of their assailant is small. In fact, the overwhelming majority of cases reported to the police did not end up in conviction, as evidenced by our recent research on sexual assaults reported to the police in 6 jurisdictions across the United States. We found that many cases drop out at the investigation stage, with only 18.8% of rapes reported to the police resulting in arrests. Significantly, more than 1/3 of these arrests of adults ended in a conviction. That's just 6.5% of investigations. I mean,
It's
that is
it is
absolute garbage.
right.
So
Yeah.
So what I see happen a lot in church culture, and of course this is everywhere else, but I kind of live and breathe and reside in church culture. But what happens typically is if there is somebody who's reported, which also is rare, so justice survivors rarely report their rapes. Victims of rape rarely report. In churches, mandated reporters rarely report when there's a credible allegation of abuse. Of those that do report, just know that virtually none of them will result in a conviction. Virtually zero.
I think if we really process that, it's like, wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
And I think knowing those facts, Jimmy, is a lot of the reason that victims of abuse don't speak out. They know that
nothing will happen.
Nothing
except
will happen, except sometimes you're drugged through the mill, having to repeat your story only to be told it's not valid. I don't believe it. This and this.
Even our justice system says that you're making this up.
Right. Absolutely.
That this didn't happen.
Absolutely. And think of how that would re-traumatize, or how it does re-traumatize victims of abuse, or survivors of abuse. It's horrible.
Well, what happens in churches is, in the rare occasion that they actually remove somebody from ministry temporarily pending an investigation, that does happen, but it's rare. When, and I say when because that's the most likely outcome, when it comes back as unfounded, that person is fully restored to ministry. And, it's such a slap in the face, because we say, as Christians, we believe in justice, we believe in the justice system, and, if they're innocent in the eyes of the court, that means they're innocent in the eyes of God. That's not true. It's just not true at all. So you have to sort that out, and you have to figure out, okay, what does justice really look like? And there are two kinds of justice. I mean, I'm sure there are more, but generally speaking, there are two different kinds of justice. There's the criminal justice. And by the way, I think our justice system is very broken, but I still believe in it. It needs lots of reform. But I would never fail to report somebody because I was our justice system's broken and it's probably not going to lead to a conviction anyway.
Right.
I always report when there's reasonable suspicion that somebody has abused an innocent person, period. So, I want to put that out there. Like, this is not a way to circumvent the justice system because it's broken. We still have to go through due process. But with that said, there's also kind of a moral, ethical justice system that seeks to honor victims and to protect them. Isaiah 1:17. I pulled this up, reading it on the screen here. It says, "Learn to do good." Kind of an interesting way to phrase it.
Yeah.
Not do good,
right,
but learn.
Right.
Learn to do good. It means you have to seek that out, right? You have to be instructed how to do good. Learn to do good, seek justice, correct oppression, bring justice to the fatherless, and please the widow's cause. Do you hear that? That's not saying, well, report it and then, wash your hands.
I've done what I need to do, and then walk away.
And if the court system finds it that it's unfounded, then, fully restore them. It's not what it says. Learn to do good. Seek justice. correct oppression. We're not doing that in the church. We don't correct oppression.
Right. No. And we've talked about this time and time and time again. It's interesting. As you're talking here, I'm thinking, had the justice system failed us, I know without doubt that your dad would have been right up there preaching.
Oh, he would have found a church, hands down. Not even a question. He would have found a church that would have taken him in.
Right. Oh, right away. Right away. And he knew that. Mm-hmm. And his plea to the judge was what? Allow me to not go to prison because I want to go into the schools to teach about people like me.
Yes.
And I want to be in the churches and teach about people like me. And often we fall for that. We fall into that trap, sadly.
My goodness, he's so repentant. He's willing to share his
horrible story with others so that he can teach them how to be safe from predators like himself. We fall
That's
for
not justice.
No. But as people, what do? We go back to that crazy thing that says, I've got to forgive everybody. Forgive everybody, restore them.
It's my Christian
accept
duty.
Them, right.
Yep.
Accept them, embrace them, bring them back in, and let's go from there.
Yeah.
It's just not true. Destroys the survivors of abuse. It just does.
And it empowers the abuser. Yes. And they're laughing at people who are that foolish. Here's another one, Micah 6:8. He has told you, O man, what is good, and what does the Lord require of you to do, but to do justice, and to love kindness, and to walk humbly with your God. God requires you to do justice. He's not talking about a criminal system. And by the way, Jewish people had a court system. That's not what he's talking about. He's talking about your average person. It's your responsibility to do justice.
What happens when that person gets restored and gets put back in the pulpit, say, or, let's just use that as an example.
They produce more victims.
Well,
they oppress more people.
What is our responsibility then? I see myself as withdrawing from that group. And there again, Jimmy, we talked about this in different podcasts. That's hard to do because you lose a church family.
Yeah, I take a little different approach because, my thing is we shouldn't be the ones to go, and that just empowers them even more because now the one dissenting voice is completely gone, and now they're
in control.
It's like steroids.
Okay.
For me, justice looks like justice looks like what this says: correct oppression, correct the oppression. If somebody's still oppressing people, you correct it. You don't walk away from it. And that means you're going to lose friends, guaranteed. You're going to lose family, almost guaranteed. You're eventually going to lose your church community, guaranteed.
Right.
You're going to lose a lot by standing up and doing what's just. And
that's where the moral issue comes in, the moral justice. When your heart knows you've done this, you are a victor. It's hard, at least for me, I think for you and for most people, to live with yourself when you know that an injustice has been, it continues to go on. You know it and you do nothing.
Yeah. And I personally can't lay my head down on a pillow at night if I know something and I don't do anything about it. I just can't.
Right.
So, and that's not because I'm trying to correct the wrongs of my father, and I've been accused of that before, and I'm like, get lost. That's not why it's not why I do what I do. I'm not trying to fix daddy wounds that I have.
Right.
Right is right, wrong is wrong, and when people are intentionally producing victims and they're harming innocent people on purpose, while they masquerade and pretend to be Christians when they're not. Justice requires us to speak up. It requires us to do something. It requires us to make their life hell. And I'm not talking about, payback and, I'm not talking about vandalizing people's property and things like that. I'm talking about calling their sins out. I'm talking about shining a light on the dark secrets of their soul, where they're intentionally oppressing and producing victims. They're producing victims against the victim's will. Why should we make things comfortable for them? Why should we
of a girl
give them
that
community
I know,
in the church?
A girl that I know whose dad, he abused her. She spoke out. The church ignored her. It just blatantly said, no, 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 no. Later on, the church finds out, yes, this is true. The justice system gave a very minimal slap on the wrist to the father. The end result is this poor girl has been harassed. She's been called every name in the book for calling out her father, the actions of her father. And that's not acceptable.
Right.
That's just not acceptable. And my heart really aches for her, because that takes guts and courage to do what she did.
Yeah.
And she did it not to seek revenge, but did it to say, hey, it's got to stop. My dad is still doing this stuff.
That's right. Revenge shouldn't even be in our vocabulary. No, it's not about revenge whatsoever.
Her intent was pure and good and right, but she ended up being, as you said, ostracized. She became the target, not the father.
Right.
And so often that happens, and people withhold then because we don't want to go through that, and it's hard. But I applaud her forever for saying, look, this is my father, but he did this, and the legal system didn't do what was just. The legal system failed, but I'm telling you, this is who he is.
Yeah.
She called him out.
Yeah.
And that's what we need to, have the courage.
And we need to call people out who
that.
shout down and target victims. And just stand up and say, what is wrong with you people?
Right.
This isn't okay. It's
never okay
to put an abuser on a pedestal and to tear down his victims. That's not justice. You're not correcting oppression. You're causing it. You're creating more oppression. And that's not what justice looks like.
I think it's frightening to a lot of us to think, well, the justice system, we're taught from little up that our laws protect us, and we're to respect the legal system and respect the laws of the land, which we are supposed to do.
Sure.
But you said it. We all know it. There are broken parts of that system, and those parts need fixing. They need reformed. And until then, it's up to us to carry out some of this. Not saying, you go out there with a gun and you do whatever. Not that way, but by calling out that person and letting others know who that person is.
Yeah, to me, that's what justice looks like. Justice is protecting the innocent and the vulnerable. It's calling people under the carpet who intentionally, willfully, and serially commit crimes against other people.
And specifically,
calling them out.
We're talking, in this case, child sex abuse. I mean, a child can't be their own advocate. They can't. They need us to do it for them.
Yeah.
And the legal system is notorious for finding loopholes where children are involved.
Yeah.
I mean, well, my child, they're making up stories. They did that. It really didn't happen that way. And the legal system fails children so often.
Yeah. So that's about a wrap on that. I mean, I don't want to keep pounding it.
Beat it
into the ground, but it's it's so important. And, that leads us to a truth bomb, is that the legal justice system is not the end meets all. We can still carry out justice if the legal justice system fails. In fact, it's required. It's our responsibility, and it's required to mete out justice and to shine a light on the evil that's being done. Protect the innocent, protect the vulnerable. That's the least we can do for our fellow brothers and sisters. Thank you for tuning into this episode, and we'll catch you next round.
Thanks again for listening to today's episode. Thank you to our patrons who make the podcast possible. If you found it helpful, please follow on Spreaker and search for the Speaking Out on Sex Abuse podcast in your favorite podcast app. Be sure to hit subscribe and rate the show. If you believe in what we do, consider supporting the podcast by becoming a patron, and check out the cool rewards our patrons receive. Share with your friends and tell the world. Join us in speaking out on sex abuse so we can change the tides and prevent abuse.